It's funny, video games have always been in my career. As it happened, when I took my first real job, which was right after I graduated high school, at what is now known as Walt Disney Imagineering, the very first project I worked on was an arcade of the future for Epcot Center. And because of that, I can say that uh, I feel like a pioneer because we were doing things way ahead of our time. This was the early 80s, and they were interactive game exhibits. So all through my career, which started out as freelance after Disney, I kept coming back to video games. There was always a little sound effects job or a little music job. And so even though I thought I'm going to be a theme park composer or a television composer or a film composer, and I dabbled in all of that, there came a point in my career where it was like, okay, industry's changing. Reality television has just completely loused up TV as far as I'm concerned back then. And it was time to make a change, to pivot. Games had always been very good to me, been there when I needed them. So I thought, well, why don't I do this full time? And you should always treat your every client like gold, because it turned out one of my very first game clients, when I called them and said, hey, I know it's been a lot of years, but could you use a few sound effects or something like that? They said, actually, we could use an audio director. So boom. And that was, golly, about 13 years ago. And I've been full time in the game industry ever since. I think the best piece of advice I could give is to be sure you really want to do this, because it's not just never give up, do what you love and all of that. That's a given. But to actually pursue what you love and to never give up requires an awful lot of sacrifice. It requires just endless dedication. You will find that pursuing something like this, where creativity and commerce, converge, and where sensitivities as an artist come up into play, that same sensitivity that makes you able to create the stuff that you do will also make it that much harder, I think, at times to survive the ups and downs. And so I tell people that if you really want to do this, if you would do this anyway, like you'd do it for free, you'd get off your day job and you stay up all night in your home studio making music or making sounds or creating your own video games with your friends and colleagues and stuff like that. If that's you, then you'll probably do all right. But if it seems like, oh, rejection would be hard, or I don't know, I really want to have, a big family and devote time to that, it's hard to merge those two. It's not impossible, but I always want people to go into this kind of thing with their eyes open, that it's a huge commitment. The same passion that you bring to your art, you need to bring to perseverance, and that then you can use the cliche of never give up, or never give up, never surrender, which is one of my favorite movie quotes. I think I spent my entire career working myself to a point in terms of experience and having done a little of this and a little of that to where I could become an audio director. And the reason I say all this experience is so important is that the audio director has the bird's eye view. I mean, yes, a soundtrack is made up of music and dialogue and sound effects. And I feel an audio director should have a vision for how all those things function relative to each other and how they function within the game. And one of the best ways to gain that sort of perspective is to have worked in all those fields. And I believe that in a lot of ways it was good that I had already been working for, in my case, 20 plus years before I became a full-fledged audio director at a company, because by that time I had recorded dialogue, I had directed dialogue, I had edited dialogue, I had processed dialogue, I had written music, I had spotted where it goes, I had orchestrated it, I had recorded it, performed it. I had done sound design for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of television and whole musical packages for theme parks. And it took the sum total of all that experience to make me even begin to be qualified to say, sit down with a game designer and look at this world they're starting to create and hear the possibilities in my head, and then be able to have a bit of an idea of, one, how to communicate to that person what my initial intentions are, and then when surrounding myself with the people who will actually do the work, communicate to them that starting point. And then once everyone's going, then the audio director has to sort of be able to pull back a little bit and trust those people. You hopefully surround yourself with, the most amazing composers and sound designers and voiceover directors, and who are hiring great musicians and voice talent and all of that. And it ends up with a lot of moving parts. One of the big challenges for an audio director is, after years of doing it all yourself, now you have to back away and you have to trust people and give them some autonomy and let them bring their A game to what they're doing. And truly believe in and nurture that idea that the whole is going to be greater than the sum of the parts when you have a really great team. And that part of that team is obviously all the game designers, whether it's the game director, creative director, producers, level designers, art directors, what have you. We're all contributing to this whole. We're all rallied around this core project that's really, really cool. And if you're really excited about it together, the audio director it kind of becomes the point of contact, where sometimes it's a tiebreaker thing. There's like too many good ideas and we have to narrow down what we're going to present. Sometimes if we're dealing with maybe a composer, for instance, who has not worked in games before, the audio director will help make that an easy transition, and be the Rosetta Stone between the game developers and, say, a film composer. You name it, the audio director has to, if not know everything about it, they have to know whom to call, and you have to be honest about knowing what you don't know and owning that. Don't pretend you know it all, and that's an important part. There's also business. I could go on and on. There's business, there's sometimes labor relationship type of situations and issues. There's certainly contracts. Sometimes I find that as an audio director, if things are going great, my job's really easy. But if we're in a session and we're down to the last few seconds of the session and the decision comes, do we have to go into overtime? And if it's a big orchestra, there's some money involved there. That decision will come down to me, and suddenly I become the most important person in the room for a second, and it's a little terrifying sometimes. But being able to be a problem solver and keep the overall view of the final product game in mind, and to make it a safe environment for creative professionals to operate within. If you're doing all that, then I think you're looking at hopefully an effective audio director. So in addition to managing the day-to-day creation of sound for a game, audio director is also the ideal person to be the evangelist for sound, for music, to the company that he or she is working for, the publisher, which may be a different entity than the company that he or she is working for. And then even probably the most rewarding is to the fans. And that is by saying, look, to whomever who will listen, and if they won't listen, you just do it anyway. You say, we just created an amazing body of music for this game. There aren't many more classy ways to cross-promote your game than to take the music that was created and put it in a format to where it can be enjoyed outside of the game, so that the player and their family can take that, can live that experience when they're on a road trip, or when they're jogging, or when they're chilling out or reading or something like that. Or maybe even playing another game that doesn't have sound, like a cards or something like that. I know many people who use the music from World of Warcraft for their D&D games as background music. So you can often get developers and publishers to release soundtracks if you talk about it as it's a promotional tool. It's a classy promotional tool. In a day and age when we're worried about, as we should be, about the effects that video games have on kids. Like in my generation, were we watching too much television? Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. Now it's like, are we playing too many video games? Should we get outside more? Well, it's so gratifying to take this soundtrack, for instance, for a game, and not only have it live in a soundtrack album CD, but then have it be reborn again in terms of a live music event of some kind. And the whole family comes to this event and sees it together. And I just love it when a family comes up to me after one of these concerts and the parents go, I get it now. I get why my kid loves these games. And I have to admit, I've got a, level 42 shaman. And it's like, how much fun is that? We've brought parents and children together. We've given them a safe, happy place to play together. And the way to make it more personal and not just a company makes a game and a bunch of people play it, the way to make it more personal is through things like soundtrack albums, art books, concerts, galleries, all types of things like that. It's a huge potential, but these are labors of love, and I think often the audio director is just simply must be a creative salesperson and let the people know that, look, you've already done the hard work, you've used the resources to create this music. It's not going to be that much harder at all to make it accessible to a whole new potential audience. And getting eyes on a website is really an amazing statistic, and so is getting ears on a soundtrack or getting sheet music into a school with a music program. That's huge. So what do I look for when listening to someone's demo or receiving demos from folks? First off, let me just get the business side out of the way. The best way to ensure that you have a chance of me hearing it is to make it in the form of a public link. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is simply convenience, because I'm most likely to listen to people's music unsolicited during lunch hour or something like that. And I don't want to have to find something. And frankly, most computers don't have CD players in them anymore. So links are really handy. But the other reason is that legally, I don't know any company that can accept an unsolicited demo. So if you put your CD or something in a package and mail it to me, I actually can't even open it because it gets into some legal stuff that's probably beyond the scope of this. So just the safety tip here is, if it's music that you want me to hear, chances are you want other people to hear it too. And the safest way is if you make it a public link on SoundCloud or YouTube or something like that, then it protects both of us. It protects the company that you're sending it to, the individual, in this case me, who is listening, from any sort of situation where it's like, oh, maybe a few months later you hear a theme that sounds like yours, and how did that happen? Was it a coincidence? Was it a this or a that? So, when you get like legal stuff involved, it's really not that hard to protect yourself and your listeners. So, legal stuff first, make it a public link. If it's a public link, I have to say, I love listening to this stuff. So the question is, what do you send? What do you link? My favorite thing when I work with a new composer, even if I already know their work and I'm excited enough about their work that I want to invite them to participate in a project, the first thing I do is I show them concept art or something like that, and I say, musically, tell me a story. It's that simple. Tell me a story. Now, with an unsolicited demo, just pretend I said, tell me a story. Make up your own, use your own artwork or something like else. Take an existing piece of film or cinematic or something within the copyright laws as they apply to you, and strip that soundtrack off and make your own. Because we're composers, yes, but I think more importantly, we are storytellers. We are communicators. Music in a game, much like film and television, only I think way cooler and with interactivity and different outcomes. We have the ability to cause a response in our listener, our player, evoke an emotional response. This is what I love. That's what in fact, how I classify art. If it evokes a response in another human being. So I say, write something that moves you. Write what you would want to hear. At my company, we always say we make the games that we want to play ourselves. I can give you an example from my own childhood. I remember being really young, maybe 10 or 11 years old, and listening to the soundtrack. I wasn't even looking at the picture, to Walt Disney's Fantasia on headphones. And I'm just listening out to all this. And at the end of the film, the last two pieces are Mussorgsky's A Night on Bald Mountain, followed by Schubert's Ave Maria. And that transition point between the profane to the sacred, it was that contrast and that transition point that brought me to tears. Stokowski wrote just a few connective notes to get from one to the other seamlessly. And that's when I decided. I remember I looked up in the sky and I just said, please, someday I want to take part in something that makes me feel this way, that makes other people feel this way. So if you can put something that means that much to you in a link or something like that, and I hear it, it's going to rise above the others for sure. So when we're looking at adding more personnel to our wonderful sound team, there are, of course, we expect you to be at the top of your craft and to be passionate about what you do and to be very good at it and have experience and things like that. And I don't mean to make that seem, I don't mean to sound flippant about that, but equally important with being good at what you do is what we would call team fit, culture fit. I remember not hiring someone one time who, while they were so qualified and they had answered every interview question like better than I would have, at the end of the day, we said, so why our company? And they said, well, my significant other wants to get back to California, and just it's so cold up there where I'm working, and I'd be so, and on, and none of it had anything to do with working on the projects that we do. And it was a difficult moment because this was otherwise a great candidate, but we had to move on, and we ended up finding, someone with different qualifications, but equally as adept and competent, but truly loved not only games in general, but our games and our genre. More importantly, our genre. They loved that kind of thing, and they shared that sense of love of storytelling and things like that. There's also a point, and I think this is pretty common in game companies, where the interview is not just with your future boss or the audio director. Chances are you'll be interviewed by the game director, both the creative director and probably a production director. And you'll get, not to be too cliche, but the right brain and left brain approach from different folks in the interview. These are all people that you would have to interface with, build relationships with, and build a base of trust with. Look at the kind of games that you love and figure out who's making those games. And if it ever flickered into your mind that oh, I'd love to work on this game. I would have loved to work there. Um, that's a good place to start. I think if you're just spamming your resume out everywhere, it's sort of like spamming a demo out everywhere. I wish I had a nickel for every, hip hop demo I've received. And I'm like, have you even looked at our website and know what we do? And I think the same thing applies if you're into racing games, for instance. That means there's a subset of companies that would be great for you, but not necessarily the one I work for. So it's team fit, cultural fit is it's definitely a real thing, and it's good for everyone because if it was a forced fit, chances are you as the employee would eventually not feel like everything's right either. I've reached that point in my career where I'm really enjoying doing that. I know it's cliched to say, but giving back. And I make the rounds every year to various like film schools and music colleges and things like that, multimedia programs, sometimes different countries even, to talk to students, people who are about to go out in the world and take a shot at chasing their dreams. And I call this little talk I give "Why We Do What We Do." And to just jump to the end of it, I always say that I got into this in the beginning because I love communicating through music and sound, and I love causing an emotional reaction in other people, and I love when it happens to me. But now that I've been doing this for a while, I've had the incredible fortune to meet some of these people who have, for whatever reason, the game that they play has become such a just like I identify maybe their entire childhood with a certain game or an era of their life. We hear about a favorite song becoming the soundtrack of someone's life or someone's relationship or something like that. And so it goes with what we create for video games. We are at a point now where people will come up to me and just say, I love the game and I love the music, but I want to tell you what the music means to me. And I've had all kinds of stories come back that are just touching, whether it was as simple as a child decided they wanted to learn a musical instrument because of something that I had the honor to work on. Someone might have built up the courage. I've had stories where someone built up the courage to throw everything in the VW bus with their $40 and go drive west or east or north or wherever the nearest game studio was and try and make it. I've had people who are dealing with really tough times in their lives tell me that a piece of music I wrote helped them get through it, to the extreme that I've had someone say that it really helped them in a really dark moment of crisis. And I remember that story in particular that I'm thinking of. After that happened, I thanked them for sharing it with me. And I realized that now, so many years later, that is why I do what I do. I thought I was just making cool stuff. But in reality, I've had the great fortune to make friends I don't even know yet, and a few I've had a chance to meet and have some kind of impact on them, just like some musical heroes I have, or Walt Disney, who's my idol of idols. My life is completely, my life would be unrecognizable without his legacy and the way he pursued his dreams. And so to feel like you've had just even a modicum of experience like that with other human beings that's what I am now enjoying in my career, and I would wish that for anybody. It's beyond money and great projects and fame or notoriety and awards and all of that. Emmy Schmemmy, that conversation with this young woman who said that she was at the brink of what would have been a very bad permanent choice. And her favorite game and her favorite piece of music made her go, think I think I want to hear this again, and I want to find more things I love and that are beautiful. Uh, that changed it all for me.